Lord Schwei. Amazing. So a couple of weeks ago, I preached about the reluctant prophets, right? The ones who were always trying to run away from the demand of singing their own song in the world, and the ways in which a call will always find us even when we try to hide from it. And in that sermon, I touched just briefly on Moses and the stuttering speech of the prophet. His wish that someone else would lead the people through these difficult desert places when he himself did not feel up for the task. This week, I've been thinking, as Paul Harvey would have said of the rest of the story, about what happened after the reluctant leader took up the task with his whole heart. And most of the story you know, I'm sure. You know that the narrative of the Hebrew Exodus teaches of a people and their leader on a journey out of sorrow and into a promised land, flowing with milk and honey, enough for everyone, each in their own way, overflowing with potential freely given, with abundance and with hope for all. We know that it was Moses who raised his hands to part the waters. It was Moses, stuttering through it all, who stood toe to toe with the Pharaoh and did not flinch. It was Moses who marched up Sinai and took his shoes off before a burning bush. If anybody deserved a great reward, at the end of 40 years in the wilderness and a great lot of uncertainty, surely if anyone deserved the realization of a perfect dream, it was Moses. And the story says that in due time, the Lord led Moses and his people right to the very edge of that promised land where there was milk and honey for everyone and power and purpose for everyone. He led him atop this mountain in the adjacent land of Moab, and the Hebrews are said to have stood on top of that mountain and had their first glimpse of the promised land below, the sacred place of hope that was promised to be theirs, even after all the suffering that had brought them there. The place is called Mount Nebo, and you can climb it today, and you can stand upon the promontory, celebrated for over 1,000 years as the gateway to the Holy Land. There are lush valleys, and there are great deserts in that land. There is in that place a land of much suffering and much sacredness. Even still, there is both promise and heartbreak in that place. And the heartbreak of the Holy Land perhaps begins with Moses, because Mount Nebo is not just the entryway to the promised land, it is also the end of the line for the leader himself. You see, the moment that Moses laid eyes on the home for his people that had been foretold, God unloaded one last big surprise on him. While Moses gazed in rapt attention at the vastness of that land below him, the story says the Lord spoke to him one last time, saying, "This is the land that I promised to Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall never go there. You may see it, hear from afar, where it looks beautiful, but you shall never walk those paths, nor till that soil. You may look upon the dream, but you will not be the one to live to see it." It is a long and somewhat infuriating theological story. I will not get into it too much today, except to say when you dig down to figure out why Moses is not allowed into the promised land, it all boils down basically to this: that he could not be the one to lead the people there because he was imperfect. Because in some central regard he had failed, and the glory of that place, seen from on high, would never be glimpsed up close, and he died on that mountain because he was not the one to lead them. He was the one for a while, but not the one for the next steps. And I could meander on these thoughts for a long time about the death of prophets, about the difficult truth that so many of them cannot live to see the realization of their own best visions. Perhaps, though, I should get to my point, which is that all of us stand upon a promontory from which to view our promised lands. All of us find ourselves yearning to know what it will take to get to that place we have been promised. The promised land viewed from a distance is all glory and grace. When you have walked with pain and struggle through a wilderness for what might feel to you like 40 years, that view from up high, uncomplicated by the holy struggle, will continue long after you're gone. And that view from on high is perhaps the greatest gift to the prophets who give everything. Because, of course, everything, including the promised land, looks really different up close, doesn't it? When your feet hit the ground, when your work in the world really starts, the fault lines show. Even the promised land you have been yearning your whole life for is imperfect. The soil of your most sacred place is full of boulders, and the people, even God's own chosen people, tear at one another, such that the unified and beautiful dream once preached by the prophets, when viewed up close, is crisscrossed by 1,000 scars. A leader who can see the promise from a distance but never lives to see the dream lying in fractured pieces around them. Maybe in some way that is a leader for all their loss who is still blessed in some way, if only in the glory of their vision and the chance to pass the burden and the beauty on to others who are themselves called to do what must be done for generations to come. For there are others. Other brave ones, other broken ones who will walk down off that mountain, leaving behind the graves of the prophets, and enter into the promised land with the equally hard work of bringing life from the hard soil, collective action up from fiercely held differences. And these leaders who walk off the mountaintops of our idealism and down into the broken and bleeding valley, these leaders who have the humility to know they cannot do any of the tasks before them alone, these leaders with enough humility to take up the mantle, even knowing they are imperfect and not always up for the task, the ones who are so much more committed to being kind than they are to being right, and who have enough personal and cultural humility to see the fractured landscape in front of them and lead anyway. These are the leaders that we need among us now. I have been pondering the idea that humility is in fact a source of great resilience, not just for leaders, but for all of us. That humility is a countermeasure to the fragility and brittleness of these days. After all, what is more fragile than perfection? The expenditure of so much effort to curate for each other and present the most perfectly polished, forward-facing version of ourselves, it is exhausting. And all one has to do to crack the very fabric of perfection is to look a little closer, to know someone a little better, to know that the veneer of perfection is and has always been just that. A veneer covering deeper, more honest, more humble, and resilient things. Things like love. And even that, love, the promised land we seek when viewed up close, it is something far, far from polished and perfected and perfect and pure. Courtney A. Walsh, in her book Dear Human, has written that even the brightly polished ideal of unconditional love, when you get down off the mountaintop and you view it up close and you live within it, that love, not seen from afar, but in your own heart when it gets real, it is by no means perfect. Dear human, she says, you have got it all wrong. You did not come here to master perfect and unconditional love. That is where you come from, where you'll return. You come here to learn a very personal love, messy love, crazy love, broken love, infused with the holy, lived through the grace of your stumbling, demonstrated through the beauty of your messing up often. You did not come here to be perfect. You did not come here to dream a perfect dream. You are here to be gorgeously human, flawed and fabulous, and to rise again into remembering. But perfect love? Stop telling that story. Love, in truth, never asked for perfection. It does not require modifiers, not even any adjectives. It does not require the condition of blamelessness. It only asks that we show up here on the ground for one another and do our best. That you stay present and feel fully, that you shine and fly and laugh and cry and hurt and heal and get back up again and live and die as if all of it matters. That's enough. That's plenty. To access the kind of humility that builds resilience in us, that can see us through the hardest times, we have to love real people in real places, not abstract notions on high of progress and perfection. We have to love up close and let the view from right here next to each other be enough, even when that view is not pretty or polished or pure. Yes, in all the places and in all the people that we hold most dear, there are fault lines that show when we really dare to look. And when we see it, all of it laid out in front of us here on the ground, when we live it personally, collectively, in community, it all gets really messy. And here we are, on the ground of the promised land, not on the mountaintop that the prophets ascended to before they were cut down, but down in the messy middle of it, among the abundance and the failure and the injustice and the grief. Here we are humbly acknowledging that we cannot alone love perfectly, nor lead perfectly, nor perhaps even be the one that gets the people where they ultimately need to go. We have stepped off of the mountain to view this world we share up close, and all of that fragility and imperfection is present in the promised land. But this imperfect place in which we find ourselves is also beautiful. It's humbling. It's worth fighting for, worth falling to our knees in gratitude for the merest chance to continue what the prophets before us began. This world, this broken thing, it is the only one we shall ever know, until perhaps new prophets arise who will have us dreaming new visions. There is only the tilling of this often rocky soil, this labor that is ours, the task of finding a way forward, where each must see with knowing eyes, and having seen, choose once again to love.